gentlemen, my name is Sherry Horowitz, and like most of you, our speakers today are volunteers. And the best way to thank them is to provide honest and useful feedback with the session evaluation at the conclusion of our session today. Our tech master will drop this evaluation into the chat toward the end of the session. And should you miss it, we will stalk you, don't worry. We will follow up with an email at the conclusion of LACE. Please, if you're not speaking, would you remember to keep yourself on mute to avoid background noise? We do have a fun and interactive session planned for today, and if you want to see the speaker and make the presentation smaller, all you need to do is simply drag the speaker window to the left. So thank you. And now let me introduce our speakers. First is Christine Brady. She is our very own past district director of Founders District. Most notably, she is the recipient of the Resilience Award from Toastmasters International in recognition of leadership throughout times of uncertainty. In her work life, Christine is the contracts manager for a national transportation analytics firm, where she performs complex analysis and negotiation of contract documentation. Christine is sharing the stage today with Vicki Nosling, who is a past district director for District 44 and the past region advisor for Region 2, where she mentored Toastmaster district leaders on leadership, conflict resolution, and strategic positioning. Vicki has taken her Toastmaster lessons seriously and taken them to the next level by launching the Find Your Leadership Confidence podcast and then co-authoring Unstoppable, being fierce, fearless, and unfuckwithable in the life and business with Rochelle Marie Lawson and others. Vicki has created 2 online courses to complement her online webinar and coaching program entitled, you ready? Vicki Nosling Confidence Academy. So if you'll start the timer, turn it over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Sherry. And thank you, Vicki, for being here and presenting with me again.
It is my pleasure.
Vicki and I said after our last session at the first LACE that it was just like being district director and region advisor all over again.
So much fun.
So much fun. Well, here we are. We are going to be talking today about building your brand through podcasting. And this is what we'll cover. What is a podcast? Choosing the right equipment, hosting, branding and developing content, recording and editing, and scheduling your episode. I have an important disclaimer. We are here to talk about our podcast journey and how we do it, but there's thousands of podcasts out there and they've most likely been produced 100 different ways. So we hope that our methods give you an idea of what it takes to launch your podcast. Vicki and I have 2 different approaches. Vicki produces a video podcast, which is hosted on YouTube. I co-create an audio-only podcast, which is hosted on my website and also audio platforms like Apple Podcasts or Spotify. We also have 2 different purposes. Vicki classifies her podcast as edutainment, where I would classify my podcast as purely social fluff.
Okay, so we have a disclaimer number 2. We have a lot to cover today, and we don't want to miss any of the important questions you might have. So ensuring that we cover everything and ensuring that your questions get answered, if you could hold them until the end, that would be so much appreciated. All of your questions are important to us, so please write them down as you think of them, and you can put them on the outline form that was provided. But whatever you do, just put those questions into that Q&A segment, and we will look through that, and at the right time, we'll go ahead and make sure that we answer them for you.
Awesome, awesome. Well, let's talk about what is a podcast. So the Oxford Dictionary defines a podcast as a digital audio file made available on the internet for downloading to a computer or mobile device. It's typically available as a series, new installments of which can be received by subscribers automatically. The podcasthost.com says, simply put, a podcast is talk radio, but on demand. And since it's pre-recorded rather than live on air, you have the ability to get more creativity and have some more fun. Now, a podcast is not one size fits all, and it's not a narration or the use of someone else's content. So those are some things to think about. All right. Now that we know what a podcast is, let's talk about equipment.
Yeah.
Vicki, what equipment is essential to recording a video podcast?
Well, Christine, everybody knows that budget is going to drive what equipment we will purchase. And for a video podcast, I'll share with you what you need. Just as the beginning, remember, you have to start somewhere. And so don't think you need all the bells and whistles right away, but you need a computer. That's the bottom line. You can't really do a podcast well on your phone. So you need a computer. You need a camera. My camera of choice is a Logitech. I have it actually on a stand so I can make it taller, shorter, move it around. It's a great tool to have, especially if you're going to be doing hybrid meetings, you can dual use this. So that camera gives you a far better resolution picture than you get from the laptop or the computer camera that you might have on your monitor. The microphone, as you see, I still am using the simple earphones, buds, or whatever you want to call them. You can use Bluetooth. You can get a regular freestanding microphone, and Christine's going to talk about that more advanced equipment. But remember, in the beginning, you can just use these simple things. The Logitech actually has a microphone on it as well. The headphones, again, same deal. I have the headphones simple, but if you are in an area where you really want to get rid of some of the other sound, you might want to get some, those, what is that? Princess Leia kind of thing.
Your cinnamon buns.
Yes, you can have those, and Christine will talk more about those. So one of the things, in addition to podcasting, that I'm going to be doing is the ability to do audible books as well as voiceover, in which case I definitely have to have some of those buns on my ears. Christine, let's go ahead and share the essentials of recording an audio only podcast.
Yes. So just like your podcast, you do need a computer, and that computer is really used for, after you've recorded. You need to have a free audio editing program. I say free because there's actually two really great free programs that you can use. Adobe has a very expensive editing program. I would not go that way. I think Audacity is what I use. That is a great free program, and it has all the bells and whistles, just like what that high and mighty Adobe has. Also, if you use a Mac, GarageBand is actually a really great editing tool, and it will have a lot of the same capabilities that Audacity will have. You can also, if you are thinking about wanting to go live with your podcast, because you can do that, you can on your computer use a service like Podbean, and you can actually record and cast all of your episodes directly from your computer. We talked a little bit about microphones. So I think Vicki sounds great using her little, easy peasy headset plus microphone. But with our audio podcast, so I feel like I'm cheating. My husband is an audio sound engineer. So we just have all this professional equipment in our garage. So when I said I wanted to start a podcast, he started bringing up, all of our expensive equipment. So I always joke that we sound like NPR because we just have this very professional setup. There's a few things to think about when you're looking at a microphone, because not everyone's going to have things in their garage. You want to think about, are you going to record directly into your computer? Because that is an option. And if you're going to do that, you would have maybe like a Blue Yeti microphone. I have some microphone recommendations in the podcast notes outline that Cassandra just posted. But, if you're just starting out and you're not even sure if podcasting is really something that you want to stick with, I would go with something that is, on the cheaper end. So exactly what Vicki is using. If you think that you are going to enjoy podcasting, would you be more willing to spend more money? And then you would invest in a higher quality microphone and maybe a mixer, which is exactly, we use a mixer, or you might have a digital recorder. Now, again, I have those microphone recommendations in that podcast notes outline, so you can take a look at that. If you are professional quality microphone, I do recommend considering the Samson microphone. That's actually a really good microphone for you to use. Now, headphones. Vicki talked about having the Princess Leia buns. When you are recording an audio only podcast, especially if you're recording into a digital mixer, it's really important to have those high quality headphones because you need to hear yourself and your co-host, if you have one, or your guest. And that's the best way to hear what it's going to sound like on the recording. And we always have our little cinnamon buns on our heads. And you want to make sure that you're testing that volume before you are recording all of your content, because it's very important. I know with my podcast co-host, she always feels like she's way too loud. I always feel like I'm a little softer, and we can adjust that by how close we're sitting to the microphone. And then we can also adjust how loud we sound in our ears so that we know that we have that volume correct. When we did the podcast, when we were first starting, we did the first 20 or so episodes without the headphones, and we found that recording with the headphones is essential. So you don't necessarily need to have those, but I would recommend it. Also, studio headphones will keep you really honest during editing. There's the low quality headphones, they're going to boost the bass, and you might end up with a really muffled audio quality when you're doing your editing. It's important that you have those headphones when you're editing, even though I always say people are listening in their car or they're listening while they're out on a run. They may not hear all of those little bumps and blips in the audio recording, but you don't want them there because they will be amplified with wherever you post. Now for the mixer, we use a Zoom LiveTrack 8 mixer, and this allows us to record our audio to an external memory card, and then we just transfer it into Audacity when we're ready to edit. Again, it's not required, because if you record directly into your phone or your computer, you can just upload that file into Audacity, but having it on a digital mixer does work for us. And I know digital mixer sounds scary, and that's another advantage I have with having the technician here in my house, because he's here to provide all of that tech support when we need it. All right, now, Vicki, another budget consideration, of course, is like the cost of all of these things that go along with the podcast. So can you talk a bit about the price considerations that you had in setting up your website and your editing?
I sure will. So first of all, I guess most obvious is you need Zoom and not the free one. So you need to at least spend $14.99 a month to get Zoom. And if you can afford the pro version as you grow, that would probably be something to consider, as well as maybe StreamYard. The website design and graphics is really going to be important, because that's where really all of your episodes will live. And that's where you're going to direct people to. Sure, I have it on YouTube and the various audio versions, but you want someplace that is your calling card. We don't use business cards as much as we do our website. So you want to have that. If you don't have the time or the inclination or the skill set maybe to do that, you can do like I did. I hired somebody to do it for me. And in 3 months, I had an awesome website that was branded, and everything about this, being a podcaster, was done for me in those 3 months. And I could talk about that later. So the next piece is that editor that Christine was talking about. I have a VA called my daughter. She's got her husband. I got my daughter. Now, I don't know how much longer I'll be able to keep my VA daughter. So I have another VA in the Philippines, but the VA is the person that does my editing of just the audio and the video. I do everything else right now beyond, except for some of the posting. I give that to the Philippines. But the thing that we found with Zoom is now Zoom's newer version allows you to have several files for your audio. So it would be a file for my voice, a file for Christine's voice, which is very important as you're editing, because if I talk too loud and she talks too soft, that mixer or that editing tool can help that be equaled out. So it sounds great, even though it didn't originally. So keep that in mind. The other tool that I have that costs just a measly $39 a month is Podmatch. That's P-O-D capital M-A-T-C-H, one word. They are the only group that I found so far that actually pays me to be a podcast host. So it's not major bucks, but I get $50 to $100 a month for being a podcast host. So keep that in mind too, because that can help you pay for that Samsung microphone later, right? And of course, you don't need these things to start. As you grow, you can expand, as you know, I'm doing now. But you need that camera, you need that computer, you need the website, and you need help with branding, program management. And there are people out there that can help you. You just have to pay for it. Christine, what are some of your budget considerations?
Yeah, we have some of those same considerations that you did. So if you're hosting a podcast just for fun, or maybe you're just want to have it available on one platform, maybe you're not even going to publish it. Maybe you're doing the Toastmasters podcasting project, so you don't need to publish this anywhere. You might want to find out how to host audio in one place and maybe the cheapest place. But in the case of Currently Obsessed, we wanted our podcast to be easily accessible so listeners could follow the podcast on nearly any platform. And as marketing and branding fans ourselves, we also wanted to host our own website. So that way our website could establish our brand more fully, and then we could carefully craft the language associated with each episode. And we could set up a site that was ready to scale when we're ready to scale. And, you know, that would be for our, what we call our obsessors. Those are our fans, any Patreon donors that we might have, newsletter subscribers, that kind of thing. Now, ultimately, we settled on hosting both our website and most of our podcasting needs through Squarespace. Squarespace allows us to simply add an audio file to our blog post for each episode, and then we add all of the necessary podcasting data behind the scenes. Once that post is live, Squarespace automatically distributes that new episode to platforms like Spotify, to Google Play, and to Stitcher. Plus, you can listen directly on our website. Now, we had some trouble when we were setting all of this up, and for some reason, Apple Podcasts would not play nicely with Squarespace. So we actually needed to investigate what we were going to do to fix that. And I started looking at other podcasting hosting sites, and I settled on Podbean. Podbean does have a separate cost for us because we want to be able to host, more than 100 episodes. They will store 100 episodes for you for a pretty low cost. We went with the pro version that will just store all of our episodes. And on Podbean, we just take the information that's in our Squarespace blog post, and we just basically create the same thing on Podbean, and that allows our podcast to go into Apple Podcasts. It seems clunky. It works for us. If you don't have unlimited funds, I wouldn't recommend having two websites, but that's what we do just specifically to get us on Apple Podcasts. It was really important to be on Apple because so many listeners are on Apple, especially when we started.
I will say that that was one of the nice things for the Done For You. The person that I had do it for me, Adam Homey, took care of all that and explained to me the Apple Fund piece, and was able to take care of that, no problem. So again, if you got the money, go ahead and do it.
It's just money, right, Vicki?
It's just
money.
And it's not a ton. I mean,
no,
it's a cruise. I don't know.
Yeah. It's a really nice dinner out. That's all.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right, Christine, branding is an important part, but it can be a fun part. So please walk us through some considerations that we should make at this step.
Yes, I think I might be behind on some slides here. So
Oh, I haven't
there we
noticed.
go. I'm sorry, everyone. Anyway, yes, branding can be very fun. So when you're looking at an audio podcast, you do need to have some kind of branding, because at a minimum for publishing, you need a square icon that displays on all of your listening platforms. And you want to think about your color scheme and what makes sense for your content, your theme, your goals, and look at podcasts in the same category as yours for inspiration. I know that we definitely did that. And then you have to think about your name. So naming your podcast is a lot like naming a business or a product. You need it to be specific enough that people understand what you're about, but simple enough that you're not pigeonholing yourself and inhibiting your future growth. So you'd hate to name your podcast SeaWorld Exposed, and only to realize that later you want to expose a lot more than maybe some things that happen at SeaWorld. In our case, Currently Obsessed was easily transferable with Currently Obsessed Club, which is our website, and we use that for email and also our social media handles. And it makes it feel inclusive of our fans. Again, we call them obsessors. And plus, we thought it was the perfect name for us because Danielle and I have very naturally obsessive personalities, and we know we're never going to run out of things to obsess over. So, Vicki, how did you come up with the name for your podcast?
Thank you so much. And I love the fact you're obsessors. It's just so perfect. So mine, as I mentioned, was a Done For You. And the great thing about it is I work with a coach. And so for 3 months, we met twice a week and we went through all those things you just described. There was this 80-page questionnaire that I had homework like every 2 weeks to do, but it really focused me on being able to do that brain dump of what I wanted for what my colors should be and what my naming should be. And he brought out things like, you don't want it to be 5 yards long because it has to fit within your screen space, if you will. And so everything that I needed to really understand was part of this exercise, if you will, to be able to create my brand. I already had a followership on Facebook about confidence, and I had my Confidence Academy. And so it just sounded like it would make perfect sense to be Find Your Leadership Confidence. What was great is now, as I'm growing, I'm finding the summits that I'm going to do are my Find Your Leadership Confidence summits. And the people that I'm serving are people that are trying to find their leadership confidence. So as I said, it was a perfect choice.
I love it so much. I think that's really great info. Another thing that you need to think about too, Vicki, I think you'll agree with me, is content. This might be one of the first things that you think of and what inspires your idea for a podcast. But as you develop your brand, you need to make sure that you're thinking about the longevity and what your original podcast goals were. It's okay that they change, but really think about, where you're starting and where you think you might end up. Think about who do you want to listen to your podcast and what content do they want to hear? And then also, how can you create content week after week or month after month to ensure that you never run out of ideas for content? Now, Vicki, for your podcast, does the guest drive the content for each episode, or is it vice versa?
Yes, the guest does. And I kind of find it much easier for me to be the interviewer. And so I have, of course, the project management hat is on. I have a form that is for all of my guests to fill out, and it really allows them to give me some basic information about who they are, where they're located. So all of their social media links, all of their websites. I ask them, what questions would you be willing or wanting to answer to promote yourself? Because I could go through their social media and find things that interest me, but it might not be their focus at that time of that interview. Or for my case, I'm 2 months out because of the volume I have. So I want to say, what questions do you want me to ask you now? Now, the great thing is that it becomes organic within that interview, and one question may lead to 4 others to make it so much more engaging and interesting. So yes, they drive the content, and I just, as a conductor, orchestrate it throughout the session.
I love that you're orchestrating. Now, you'll see here on the slide the format for each of the posts that our websites do. So on the left-hand side is what a blog post would look like for Currently Obsessed. And this was a more recent episode. And you'll see that we have our picture. It's always showing. And then we title the episode. that is always some funny line that we pull out of what we said. So this particular one, nobody wants their dead friend in the pool. I can't even remember what we were talking about, but that was exceptionally a funny little saying. And then we have a little write-up that shows up underneath. For Vicky's on the right-hand side of the slide, she has I love her little avatar, and you'll see she's presenting and showing the guest. And then she has her title. She also has a tagline, but hers is more on what the discussion was. It's not something that got pulled out. It's the overarching theme of what they discussed. And so all of her posts follow the same format. And I think that is good when you're doing your branding, to think about, keeping all of those things consistent. Also, the frequency. So Vicky talked about being a few months out. I know for our podcast as well, we do record ahead of time. And then as we are catching up, we'll be posting. And you just want to make sure that you're choosing a schedule for publishing your episodes that makes sense for your lifestyle. It's for your available time and also for your skill set. You don't want to be pushing yourself if it's something that's really hard for you. Think about everything that you have to accomplish for each episode and determine not only how frequently you will post, but how far ahead you should work so you can maintain your schedule. Danielle and I are always looking to see, when are we on vacation, what holidays are coming up, if we're going to be especially busy with something, and we tend to not record on those days. But if we're still releasing that week, we need to have content. So we make sure that we're following that. All right, so for our podcast, we have a joke that once we have a Google Doc, we're committed, right? Those are all of our notes. So Vicky, walk us through how you keep your recording and release schedule straight.
Thank you so much. So for me, again, the project manager was the ideal thing to guide me. I have a OneHub scheduler that I go through that calendar, if you will, for about a 3 to 4 month schedule of days that I know I'm going to be traveling or being out. I also have, just as a rule, these are times when I'm available to speak or to interview, and these are times when I'm not. So that eliminates somebody scheduling something at 7 a.m. or 4 a.m. if they're international, if I'm not willing to do that. Now, I have made some exceptions to those rules when someone comes back and saying, well, I can't find anything that works with me. I'm coming from Australia, in which case, I'll adjust my schedule. But it allows the guest to see my time available and match it with theirs, which eliminates a lot of back and forth. We don't have time for back and forth. The raw material gets to my editor, so my VA. So I give my daughter a month's worth of material to edit, as I'm 2 months out anyway. So I'm always giving her a month of information, and she can usually get it done in about 2 days. So even though I give her a month, it's really only a month and 2 days that I'm behind. The edited material is all scheduled to be released. As I mentioned earlier, I use Podmatch. So with Podmatch, it links to my OneHub. It allows that person then to have it on their calendar. It goes on my calendar, and Podmatch reminds me of things I have coming up, as well as when I'm going to schedule the release. And that allows me to have a back and forth email situation going on to inform them when things are coming. And you have to consider storage space. So I have an external storage device that holds like a trillion, I don't know, some crazy amount. And I store everything on that rather than Zoom. The cost for Zoom was only allowing me to have like 15 or so things out there. So I put everything there. It's backed up. Plus, once my daughter puts it on her back, she has another external drive. So I have double backup of my podcast just to be safe. Christine, what does your recording and release schedule look like?
I feel like we're not as organized as you, but we're pretty organized. We keep a general Google sheet of all of our topic ideas, and we also track each episode on that Google sheet. And then I made a joke about the Google Doc. So what is showing on this slide is this is our template for each one of our episodes. And we typically our podcast has 3 segments, if you will. The first segment is when we talk about what we're obsessed with for that episode. And then the main body of the podcast will be actually our theme for that episode. And then at the end, when we're able to be in person and together, I like to put obsessed to the taste test and put kind of weird food in front of Danielle, and we both try it and we rate it on a scale of obsessed or get away from me. It was gross. But, we like to use this Google Doc for all of our brainstorming, and that allows us to put all of our ideas and our research links into the document. So typically we will have this document done for each episode and we will refer back to it. We don't create a script. I want this to be very much just bullet points or just little ideas, because I don't want us to sound scripted. I want it to sound like our listeners are actually eavesdropping on us, like if we were just chatting at lunch or at Starbucks. So once you get your format down, I recommend that you do create a template that kind of mimics this, so that you can really, make sure that you're curating all of your content into that format that you designed, so that it stays true to your brand. Danielle and I have had the same format the whole time. And so if you listen to episode 2 or episode 159, you're going to hear that same cadence of our episodes. So not only does this document help us while we're recording, it also helps us when we're scheduling the episode, because Danielle does take notes within this, and then that's what she uses to pull all of her information from into those blog posts. About scheduling, I did mention before that we do work a few episodes just so we can stay consistent, like we stay a little bit ahead. Again, it's important when there's holidays, family events. Danielle just recently moved to Toronto, and so that created a big disruption for our schedule, because moving is stressful, right? And now she's going to be planning a wedding. And so again, there's going to be something else that we have to work around. So we really have to be mindful and be recording ahead. And, that means planning that content, to start to publish before you go. Also, if you are starting a podcast, the recommendation is that when you go to release, you want to release at least 5 episodes at the same time, so that you have something for guests to grab onto, and you hook them, right? You hook them with those first 5, and then you really start just releasing on a weekly or maybe bi-weekly basis. Okay, so Vicky, we occasionally have guests. I know your episodes are like all about you and the guest. So we have to talk about prepping our guests. I think you'll agree this is a really important aspect. So how do you prep your guests?
Thank you. The key, I think, to making that guest immediately feel comfortable is the prep. So I have templates, as you mentioned, for almost everything that I do. And it makes things go faster, but it also keeps you consistent and organized and gives that comfort level to your guests. So I send out at least 2 days, sometimes a week in advance, an email that just goes through. It's 2 pages of what to expect. And it's all the same content except for the middle part, which I have to switch out, that tells them these are the 5 to 7 questions I'm going to ask you, so they can prepare, and reminds them that I'm going to have a rapid fire where they'll have 4 or 5 questions they don't know, but they'll be easy, quick to, table topic type of thing. And then the closing. Whenever they get on, I actually will have about 5 minutes where I'll go through the run of the show. Then I will show them a slide that has all of their content for being able to contact them, as well as what their social media sites are and website, and if they have a gift. Again, that gives a visual, because I'm audio and visual. It allows them to see that I'm promoting those areas for them, as well as that all goes, whenever I transfer it to YouTube or my website, it's just a cut and paste, easy activity. So for me to actually post my podcast, it takes me about 15 minutes now. So I post anywhere from 2 to 10 a week. And that's crazy a lot, but it doesn't take me a lot of time. But as Christine mentioned, it is really important because now I'm not only having a single audience besides mine looking at that. Now I have a totally different audience looking at these 2 different podcasts, or in some cases, 3 different podcasts. So it increases their visibility. It's a more win-win for everyone. And that's why I do it that way. All right, that is how I do it. But Christine, you have to prepare for guests now and then, right? So how do you prepare?
Yeah, we do have guests now and then. So the first thing after we've scheduled the guest is we have to remind them that at the beginning, we're going to each share an obsession. So they need to come prepared with their obsession. And then we do have some considerations for the recording, right? Because we're audio only and I need space to edit, we do ask that we try not to talk over each other as much as possible. It's hard. It's a little bit awkward when you are starting out with this audio only podcast and thinking about needing that space. I only need a fraction of a second of silence, but it needs to be there. So it's important to not talk over each other as much as possible. We also take time to practice how each of us sits, how close we need to be to the microphone. Our guests will also have the headphones on if we're live here. You can see that all the magic happens in that picture. It's right here at my dining room table. We call it the Nook, and that's where we record. That's our little recording studio. So we will practice how close we sit to the microphone. The guest needs to get comfortable with having those headsets on and hearing themselves. I like us to be pretty chatty before the episode starts. So before I start recording, I want us talking and being on the microphone and with those headphones on because I want them to forget that we're recording. People get very nervous when they hear themselves. It's different to hear yourself in your ears versus how you just hear yourself when you're speaking. And so it's really important that we kind of try to manage that anxiety. So, I just have a sit down. We just do our little thing, we get chatting, and then once we feel comfortable, I will hit record. And sometimes that will raise the anxiety level. I can see it happen. And so we will just keep talking. I'm not going to use that material. We'll just keep talking. And then once I feel like we're a little bit more natural again, we always start our podcast by saying, happy podcast day. And that's the key to the guests that now we're doing this and we're going to try not to, mess up too much. I like to, again, have that Google Doc open just so that we have a loose idea of where the episode is going. But again, it's not scripted. And once we're done with the episode, I stop recording and then there it is. It's done. It's right there in the bag and we can congratulate our guest for getting through it. It is an accomplishment. Okay, so Vicki, now that we've recorded, we talked a little bit about editing. Are there any considerations or conversations that you have with the editor before they work on the episode? So I know you send that out to your VA, but what are you talking about when you send it?
So it was funny. One of the things you mentioned about space, even though I'm doing video, I still need to be considering the space between my speaking and the guest. And so my daughter has reminded me to do just as you said, to have that tick of space before I ask a question, to give, even though it might feel awkward at first, to give that pause so that she can edit if necessary. She also at times has to take care of the doorbell ring or the dog on the other side started barking or the person's sound completely stopped or a storm came in and their internet got bad and so they're walking around the room trying to find a good place again. So you have to be able to pivot as necessary. In the case where the internet went out, I found where it worked, re-asked the question again as if nothing happened, and my daughter got a note on my file folder that said, this space needs to go. And then she edits it out. Sometimes if I forget, she does go through it and she will ask me, do you need this? Or if I screwed up the slide, for example, they changed it after the fact, then she will redo the slide, reinsert a new slide for me.
Hmm.
So there are just things that you have to be considerate of, but you want to make sure that you don't panic. And sometimes if we have a mistake and I think we can make a humorous moment of it, I'll do that and I'll not edit it out. And it just makes it seem like our conversation's just around the table. So how do you edit, Christine?
Well, I do kind of the same thing, but I don't have to send it out though. I do the editing here. And there's two schools of thought on editing an audio podcast. So thinking about, to edit or not to edit. There's podcasts out there that just are like, I don't know, whatever we recorded, that's the episode. So that's what's going out. And it's very, natural. Because of course, if you're eavesdropping on someone at the cafe, they're not editing their conversation really. So you want to edit if it makes sense for the flow of your podcast, and take out anything that doesn't belong, and remembering that the audience is going to hear all of those sidebars, the tangents, the gossip, the motorcycle going by, coughing, cats meowing, that kind of thing. Sometimes you just want to edit because you want just that strong content. And you want to keep your episodes short, so if you only want 20 minutes, then you have to decide, like, what am I going to cut out of this 45 minutes worth of audio in order to make it 20 minutes? Like I said, I do take that file and I upload it into that program, Audacity, and that's that free program. If you are recording directly in Audacity, you don't have to take anything and upload it. It's already there. And Audacity has step-by-step guides, so you can learn how to use all the bells and whistles. They're very fun. I don't even think I use 15% of the features within Audacity. It's a very powerful program. I do sit and listen to the episode and edit as I go. So I have a little notebook and I'll just make some notes with timestamps of when I might need to start and stop the cuts. And the beauty of Audacity is that you can zoom in on those fractions of a second to find those little spaces of silence, and you can cut things out. One thing to note is I talked a little bit about when our voices can be louder or quieter, and that is one thing with Audacity. It can't adjust the volume as much as you would think. So sometimes I'll think, gosh, what we were talking about was very funny, but maybe it's not super appropriate. I'm going to try to cut it out. And then I can't cut it because whatever was before or behind it was a lot quieter. And so it just makes it seem the cut is weird. You can tell that it was cut. My point is to always cut it so that you can't hear it. Once those edits are complete, we upload that file. And for our podcast, my podcast co-creator, Danielle, she takes that final file and she creates our website post and she uploads the episode. And then once she's done, remember, I take it from Squarespace and then I drop it into Podbean and we're good to go. That's how we do it. So now that we have all of our edits complete and they're approved, we've uploaded the file. So Vicki, how are you publishing each episode?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, I take advantage of all the templates that I have to prepare for the podcast. And this process really helps me be able to do this, as I said, in about 15 minutes per podcast. The master document is the base or the foundation, and it includes everything that I need to fill all my other templates. I have a YouTube template, I have an MP3 for the audio template. And in the audio, you have to fill out the details of the properties of that to be able to upload it to Amazon. So when I have the MP3 template finished, I upload my 2 files to Amazon. And then after the Amazon concludes, which takes anywhere from, 10 to 12 minutes, then I upload to YouTube, the video portion. And my video template is really quick because it's just, I put in the name and then all of the rest of the detail about the podcast, the description of it, the ability for an excerpt, the bio, all of the links. It's like Zoom, click, you're done. So that takes seconds to put in there. And then it takes the longest time, maybe 15, 20 minutes to upload the video. After that's finished, I put it all to my website. And then I have, that 15 minutes and the 12 minutes for the other, I'm creating the social media post, the recap of my excerpt, my swipe copy, my graphics are also created, which are needed for both the YouTube and my website. And so, as I said, all said and done takes about 20 minutes to get done, and very easy for me to do a few in a night. Christine, tell us what you do.
So I'm just showing, I wanted to show, this is what Vicky's post looks like for each of her videos. And you can see that she has all of her information with all the metadata. And then I like at the bottom, she has the key moments where it really talks about what each, maybe the questions or maybe something that stood out. And so she's definitely putting in those timestamps into her episodes. For us, I think I went over this earlier, we're just putting in that episode title, the subtitle or the excerpt, the funny quote. We have our episode summary guide, and then we also make sure that we include any metadata. So if somebody is, doing a search on our topic, hopefully our podcast episode will pop up. And I did put a lot more information about how we do it into that outline that Cassandra had posted earlier. And so that's kind of what we do. And then again, it gets copied from Squarespace over into Podbean. Michael Dugan, you're saying, where do you include the metadata? There's actually a space within both Squarespace for our episodes and for our Podbean where you put in some keyword searches. And if you go explore on any of those websites, you'll see how you can put that in. All right, I know we just shared so much information, but here's our contact information. I know that we are having a hard stop at 11 o'clock, but we have a couple minutes for questions. So let's see, Sylvia, did we have any questions? And I'm going to stop sharing.
To answer your question, let's see. A moment, sorry. Where do you include the metadata? That was answered. No new questions yet.
All right. Does anyone have any questions there? You can unmute. Go ahead, AJ.
First of all, thank you. This was drinking from a fire hose. So much information. The first thing that rolled by was, is there some way we can get, Vicki, your template for briefing a guest? Part of me was listening to you and thinking, this is the panel discussion project. And we could fold this into the panel discussion project to get our panel discussion people ready to become guests on a podcast and connect those two projects together. That was exciting to me. The other question has to do with, when I'm speaking to someone like you, I can feel ahs and ums flying out of my mouth while I'm thinking. Is that an issue? Do you actually scrub for it, or do you keep that as part of the casualness?
I'll go for that. Most of the people that I interview are not Toastmasters. And if I would edit ums and ahs out, it would be very broken up and not really a good interview. I think the thing that makes my interviews comfortable and casual is the fact that it's a conversation. And if we were sitting at a bar or at a restaurant having a conversation about what they do, we would not have anything edited out, right? I want it to be authentic. I want it to feel comfortable. And so I don't do anything to edit it out. But what I do for a living is to coach people on speaking. So I will have a conversation after to talk about how I could help them with that.
Sylvia, I know Michael Dugan has it, but I don't know if we have time for one more question.
Oh, go ahead. One more question.
Okay, one
sure.
more question. All right, Michael.
First, thank you both. Fantastic presentation. I'm a chef podcaster, and because of Toastmasters, I interview chefs around the world.
Awesome.
And what I wanted to just share really quick is you can do the podcast project, but even better, if you really want to start a project or a podcast, do it as a high performance leadership project and gather a team of people, because we developed this vision, values. The whole piece was part of that. And I had incredible people that brainstormed for about a month and a half on developing the podcast. I'm in a very niche market, but I loved this presentation. And I just want to encourage people, if you decide to do it, definitely do it through Toastmasters and do it through the projects. Thank
Yeah,
you.
I agree with that wholeheartedly. I think that, it sounds daunting when you think about all of the equipment that you might need,
Oh,
but
yeah.
once you get started, you discover you don't need to have all this fancy stuff. If you
Mhm.
have it, great, but you really don't need it.
But when you become obsessed,
When you are
that's
obsessed,
what happens.
then that's when you start saying it's just money.
Yeah, but the thing is, I got started doing podcasts as a project for Toastmasters.
Wow.
And the thing that it's all about timing in life. It was
Mhm.
during the pandemic, and
Mm.
I did that project. And then I realized I had church friends that were elderly that were all alone. And so I started doing podcasts, kind like situations, to make these elderly people not feel alone. And that went so well. Then I started interviewing people that were older than me and younger than me, just to get their perspectives. And I thought, I should just do this. So I found the guy could do it for me, and there you go. All
Yeah,
from
it's
one project in Toastmasters.
Yeah.
Let's
But I
give
was
our
really
presenters a
looking
big,
forward to this. Oh, sorry for interrupting. I was really
No,
looking
no.
forward to this, and I just want to thank you.
Thank you,
thank
Michael.
you. A big hand for our presenters today. We hope you enjoyed the session today, and it sounds like you did, and it was wonderful. Thank you. To thank our speaker, please provide your feedback using the link in chat. If you miss it, you'll see the survey again when you log out. Drop into our Pathway Support Group session at 3:20 p.m. Visit Founders District, and that is /LACE, foundersdistrict.org/LACE, and you can register for that session for extra help. Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.
Vicky and
Thank you.
Christine.
Thank you.